Good morning, everybody. So welcome to P4 Workshop and welcome to Stanford. I'm Nick McEwen. It's great to have you here today. And I'm going to hand over to Nate in a moment, but I just want to say it's just terrific to have another workshop. It's been progressing for several years now, and each year the talks that we hear get more real. The demos become more real, and it really feels as though there's an ecosystem and a community that's building. So it's really, really wonderful to welcome you all here today. I would like to just very briefly thank all of the people that are involved in organizing an event like this, but particularly Nate, who I'm going to hand over to in a moment. I'm going to embarrass him first and just say Nate has put in an enormous amount of work to build the program, to get everybody here to oversee the organization of the event. He's had a team of helpers who he's going to call out in a few minutes. But I just wanted to ask you to join me in thanking Nate for organizing today.
All right. Thanks, Nick. Okay, so I wanted to kind of give you a sense of what's going to happen today, but also a little bit more broadly, where is P4 going and what's happening to the language in the community. Anyone know what this is? Tower of Babel. Anyone know this painting? No art historians? This is a rather famous painting by Peter Bruegel from the 16th century. He actually did multiple paintings of the Tower of Babel. And this one is from, I believe, a museum in Vienna is where it sits right now. So probably most of you know the story of the Tower of Babel. It's an ancient myth that appears in many religions, but especially the Jewish Christian Bible. And for those of you who don't know, the story is that sort of after the Great Flood, civilization sort of started to advance, and people built this very large tower as a way to sort of reach up to the heavens. And the Lord has this line from the Bible where he says, "Behold, they are one people, and they all have one language, and this is only the beginning of what they will do, and nothing they propose to do will now be impossible for them." And so his remedy to this problem, I'm not sure why this was a problem, but the early part of the Bible sort of has a tension between sort of humans and gods, or God, and his solution was to cause them to speak many different languages and then disperse and not be able to do crazy things like build large edifices like this. So I don't know what lessons I want to draw from that, but I guess if there is a lesson, it's that there's great power in rallying around common ideas and common languages. And I think as a community, I see that in P4 quite a bit. I think we're really one community. We're quite diverse. We're working on different kinds of targets. We're working on different applications. But we're all finding value in rallying around this one artifact, the P4 language. And I also believe that we have all the ingredients that we need to build and operate networks using P4. P4 doesn't completely solve all the problems in networking, as great as it is, but it's a critical piece, and a piece that's been missing for many decades. So I'm quite excited, and I'll boldly say that I think nothing we propose to do will be impossible for us. So coming back down to earth, as far as where things are this year, I sort of like to review in different communities and different areas the impact that P4 is having. So on the academic side, this has been true for a long time, but once again, if you look at the top conferences in systems and networking and programming languages, you find lots of papers that are either about P4 or using P4 as a central part of what they're doing. And this year especially, there was a number of the best papers at these conferences were given to papers that used P4. So that was pretty exciting. We're also seeing increasing interest in using P4 as a vehicle for teaching. So there were new courses at some of the top universities, as well as, of course, events put on by the community. One I want to particularly call out is Laurent Van Wever at ETH Zurich designed a whole course around data plane programming and developed a great series of exercises and put them all online on GitHub for anyone to use. And so I think we'll continue to see this, and having P4 as a part of how we teach networking, I think will improve how we teach networking and also lead to quite a lot of impact for the work that this community is doing. In industry, once again, we continue to see progress on real-world deployments of P4 in a growing set of P4 targets and products that are using P4 in different ways. And then in terms of the community, we continue to grow. You probably don't see this, but every time a new member is added to P4, I get an email as their logo is put on the website and their membership is processed. So we're well over 125 members, which includes both institutional memberships and individuals. We have 5 working groups. And new this year, we finalized our merger with ONF, which was announced last year. And we put in place an open and clearly specified governance model for P4. So that clarifies how kind of big decisions we made and questions about who's the leadership of the community are all spelled out now in a document on GitHub. And we also organized a large number of community events. I'll cover some of these later. So sort of stepping back, I think the reason that I'm excited about P4 is that we're seeing it kind of become the lingua franca of data plane programming. And because data planes are so central to how networking works, it's becoming this central piece of lots and lots of network systems. The phrase that I think Amin Vedat first said to me, at least, which I like, is P4 is a way of expressing this contract between the control plane and its view of what the network is going to do, and the data plane. So whether your target is an FPGA or a fixed function switch or maybe a programmable switch or a software switch, and whether your control plane is an SDN control plane or something conventional, people are finding value in having a specification in the middle of what the data plane is doing. So now I want to shift and talk a bit about kind of down in the trenches, what's been happening at a technical level in each of the different working groups. And I'll start, these are in no particular order, but I'll start with the API working group. So this year, after much hard work by Antonin, Wakara, and all the members of the working group, they released version 1 of the P4 runtime spec. And P4 runtime has been quickly adopted. It's being used in the Stratum NOS and the ONOS controller, as well as in other systems. And just to give a sense of where the API working group is going to go in the future, there's a lot of technical details related to how controllers can arbitrate with switches, how controllers, multiple controllers might get involved with managing switches, and also in building out some of the tools around P4 runtime. So Anson, I know, is working on an interactive Python shell that will provide a very easy way to script and manage P4 runtime controlled switches. In the architecture working group, this year they released a new version of the portable switch architecture specification, and also a group of MN students produced an open source implementation of PSA that runs on BMV2. It's a partial implementation, so it doesn't have the entire architecture implemented, but you can send packets through, and we're hopeful this will lay a groundwork for other people to jump in and help complete that implementation. You can see their demo in the demo track during the breaks. And looking ahead, there's a bunch of topics that the group is working on. So there's a subgroup that's looking at whether there should be a portable NIC architecture and what that might look like. There's another group that's looking at features that could support programmable scheduling in P4 and more generally active queue management. And then there's a lot of work on improving the documentation of the current architecture specs, both PSA, V1 model, and others that might emerge. In the language design working group, there have been a bunch of meetings and a bunch of progress on the spec, fixing inconsistencies, bugs, holes in the spec. There's been some ergonomic improvements to the type system, so new constructs that make it a little bit easier to write P4 programs, and a lot of work on designing modular programming features. And in the coming year, we hope to finalize the P4 module system and get that in place. There's interest in developing constructs to support specifying the behavior of P4 architectures directly in the language, as opposed to having to do that off on the side. There's a group interested in enriching the notion of event that a P4 program can be driven by. So right now, P4 programs are driven by packets, but you can imagine there being timers and other kinds of events that might drive the execution of a program. And then there's interest in also formalizing the language semantics. In the applications working group, there's been quite a lot of progress towards a version 2 specification of in-band network telemetry. I think they're planning to release that later this month. They also built out some of the tools and data models and schemas around that. So there's a Yang model now for INT metadata. And they've explored some extensions for different transports and different models where telemetry data is exported at each hop as opposed to at the end. And so in the future, the group is planning to finish this 2.0 release and then possibly broaden their scope and look at other applications beyond telemetry. And then lastly, the education working group, which was created new last year, organized, I think, monthly meetings, and they've created a repository for people who are teaching P4 to put their materials. And so they've had a lot of action from people at various universities and companies contributing to that. And then the thrust of their work has been around organizing tutorials and hackathons. So they presented tutorials at academic conferences and across several different continents. And they also organized the first few hackathons, one at NSTI in Boston this spring and another in Frankfurt. And looking ahead, they're hoping to continue to curate material for academic courses and also develop a programmer's guide for P4 that could accompany the specification documents but provide a more hands-on introduction to the language. Okay, so I want to say a few words about the P4 and ONF merger. So this is something we announced last year at this workshop, and it finalized a couple months ago. And the main message is that for the foreseeable future, this will be business as usual. So all of the P4 assets that people use in the day-to-day work, the website, GitHub, mailing lists, these are all being preserved as they are. All the P4 working groups will continue under their same leadership, and the community remains open and free. So anyone can contribute, and there's no special membership agreement needed to get involved. One change we did make is we shored up the governance model for P4. So P4 has been run by a board consisting of Nick, Jen Rexford, and Amin Vedat. And we've written out a document that spells out who the board is, what they do, and more importantly, how they are chosen in the future. So the name of this new entity is called the P4 Technical Steering Team. And it initially consists of the current P4 board plus Guru, who's the ONF executive director. And this board will serve for until late 2020, at which point we'll have our first elections, where half the board will come up for election, and anyone who's an active contributor to P4 will be able to vote and pick the new members of the TST. So I think this is a really positive change for the community. Having open, well-documented processes for how we govern ourselves is an important part of being an open source project, and we've taken the first big step towards doing that. If you're curious about the details, there's not a whole lot written, but you can go to the GitHub site that I have on the slides here, which has these documents that spell out these processes. And more generally, in the future, I think there's going to be a lot of synergies being a part of ONF. So ONF provides a lot of structure and help in curating open source projects in the networking space. We're already seeing this with synergies between P4 runtime and projects like ONOS and Stratum, and I think we'll see other synergies between ONF projects in the future. And in addition to the ONF merger, we're still seeking to find ways to align with the Linux Foundation, which is an even bigger organization that's nurturing and curating lots of projects in networking. So if you're new to the community and want to get involved, as I already said, it's free, it's open, you can jump right in. We have lots of people who were not part of the early efforts around P4, but either came to a workshop or started tinkering with things on their own and have become leading members of the community. So if that's you, please jump in. The best way to get involved is to get involved with the working groups. This is where the actual technical work on the language and software tools happens. If you go to our website, you'll find a listing of the working groups. We have a website where we keep all of the meetings. There's mailing lists. And I think you'll find that it's a really open community with no real barriers to entry. If you have good ideas, you can jump in and contribute, and you'll be welcomed. Okay, I have one last thing I want to do, which is we have this tradition of awarding a Distinguished Service Award to someone in the community who's really stood out for their contributions over the past year. And I don't have the Oscar envelope, but I will do a bit of mystery here with revealing the citation first. So I'll just read it out. This is for dedicated service as co-chair of a working group, contributor to software projects, and a mentor to new members of the community. So over the past few years, this person's been one of the most active members of the P4 community. He regularly participates in multiple working groups. He's made essential contributions to the P4 language spec, the P4 runtime spec, and the portable switch architecture spec. He's written numerous lines of open source code, including hundreds of test cases for P4C and BMV2, our main software tools, that exercise really tricky corner cases and have informed design discussions. On top of all of this, he's been a dedicated mentor to new users. He's one of the most active members of our mailing lists and Slack channel, and he's also curated a wonderful set of example programs that are a popular way that people who are new to P4 get into the language. So please welcome me in congratulating Andy Fingerhut. Please come up. So we have a nice plaque for his office or home.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Great. All right, so our plan for the rest of the day, we're going to spend most of the day in technical talks. We have 9 talks. They're about 20 minutes each. And our session chairs have been instructed to ruthlessly keep us on time. So please do stick to 20 minutes for the whole session. I'm really excited that we have a keynote from John Hennessy. Probably everyone here knows John. You probably learned architecture from his textbook. But in case you don't, John's one of the most prominent computer scientists and computer architects in the world. And last year, during his Turing Award speech, he actually had a section where he called out P4 as an example of the kind of work that he thinks will be exciting in the future. So he's going to cover that talk right after lunch. The title is The End of Moore's Law and Faster General Purpose Processors and a New Road Forward. So I'm really excited for that, and I hope you'll find it great too. And then we also have a demo track, which is at the other end of the hallway. So we have 13 demos and 2 posters. And to help you understand what those demos are, at the end of the morning sessions, we have some lightning talks where the people who are presenting demos will give a 1-minute teaser talk for what they're doing. So please go visit the demos. They're usually the sort of most lively part of the P4 workshop, and you can get a sense of what people are doing today using P4. Okay, so before I turn it over to Colin for the first session, I want to briefly thank the program committee that reviewed all of the submissions to the workshop on a really short schedule. So that's myself, Nick, Anirudh, Gordon, Harry, Meena, and Sandesh. I also want to thank Sadef and Rachel, who checked you in at registration. Nick tried to embarrass me by saying I'd done lots of hard work. Sadef and Rachel were the people who actually kept everything on track. We had weekly meetings every Friday, and they would have done hours of work to handle all of the little logistics that go into putting a meeting like this. So this would not have happened without their huge efforts. And then lastly, the P4 technical steering team, Nick, Guru, Jen, and Amin. I also want to thank our sponsors. We run this workshop on a shoestring. So it would not be possible to keep the cost low and to get this beautiful space without their support. So AT&T, Barefoot, Cisco, Google, Netcope, and Xilinx all contributed sponsorship funds which made this possible. All right, so thank you. And without further ado, I'll turn it over to Colin, who's going to chair the first session